but it was just very interesting, and there were a number of things that I sort of resonated with, and it felt like she was, I enjoyed it, but it just made me a little more hopeful.
Right.
Like, oh, it's exciting. Good morning.
Good morning. Sorry I'm late.
No problem.
I was telling her I went to a psychic yesterday and got a reading.
Oh yeah? How was that?
I was telling her how that went. They said that I'm ready for the next level.
And you said, I was born ready, baby. I was born ready.
No, I was not born ready. But I do believe I've gotten much more ready than how I was born.
Aw, very cool. That's fun. That's like
I like to do every once in a while. I think those are fun. And there was years ago, this is a quick story. I took my daughter to one, and it was 6 years ago. Mm-hmm. And the woman told her there's a little girl like hanging around you. And she said, oh, that must be, the daughter that I have. And she said, no, there's another girl who's waiting to come into your life. And back then my daughter already had 3 kids, and she's like, no. She was having problems in her marriage. I'm not having any more kids. Like, forget it. And she's like, no, I see the month of January, and there's this little girl waiting for you. And 3 years later, she had a little girl in January.
Wow.
God, eh?
So that made a believer out of my daughter.
Yeah, I bet. Oh, it already started recording. I guess it just automatically started recording when I hopped on here. So.
All right. So what chapter are we on? Is it 46 and 47 in the big book?
Yeah, 12 and 13 in the little book.
Okay.
Now I've tried something new, and that is I had a long drive. Where was I going? I went to Vermont, and I listened to these, so I have no notes taken, and that was like a week ago. So we'll see how useful I am.
Okay. All good. Yeah.
Well, 46 is really, really small.
It is. It's like 2 pages, and then the next, or 3, and then the next chapter, I only got about halfway through, but I have highlights from the first time I read it, so I'll just fall back on that. Okay, so intentions just to come together, love each other up while we go through this material. What did you guys have from the first chapter 12 there, the chairman of the board and our probable relative importance?
No, I forgot. The chairman of the board is not the big cheese. The big cheese is below the chairman of the board. Is that correct?
I'm not sure. That's the first time I've heard him. I can remember the chairman.
It says Alm is the chairman of the board and chief executive officer.
That's the chairman, as well as blah, blah, blah. Continuing with this decidedly funky but business-like metaphor, the big cheese is the division manager of N division, dedicated to a specific subset of the evolutionary development models containing many PMRs. Okay. It's just that Tom talked a lot about the big cheese in his last seminar, the thing that Donna and I were at.
Oh, did you get any really good stuff like that he's never talked about before? Like, I love his stories, and he doesn't always.
I wish I could record him and stuff, but I suspect they're going to edit out this stuff because it gets too kind of freaky. It's the kind of stuff he doesn't really like to say that much in public. But there are a few people that were asking him, and he was like, all right, I'll go there. But he was basically talking about how he's referred to in some podcasts and videos, I'm sure you've heard this, how there was a change,
He talked about that at one of the ones in Tennessee.
Yeah. And so he was just talking about that again, and he was talking about that the change came about when around the time that there was like the Holocaust and, you know, like all that kind of stuff. And when the bad stuff was happening because it was an imbalance of power, because some like evil forces had kind of degraded the big cheese's ability to make wise decision, and people hadn't really noticed. And so that there was this like, you know, bad force thing and all these bad things were happening. And then when there was like an overthrow or whatever, and there was a new big cheese, that's around the time like the Berlin Wall came down and all that sort of stuff. And so he was saying that it made a meaningful difference because what had happened, that's what he said. He said what had happened during the imbalance is that the rules had shifted such that the evil forces, the good forces were never willing to be as tough as the evil forces, which meant the evil forces then had kind of like an advantage, and the rules of the game were not supposed to be that imbalanced. So this change came about, good stuff happened, and then people were talking about like today, and it feels like today a lot of bad stuff is happening. And what he said, which made me feel quite comforted, because it's sort of how I've been trying to look at it, for sanity's sake anyway, is that a lot of the things that seem bad right now are kind of like when you get an animal that's you finally have cornered and is caged, and they, you know, puff up their fur and they snarl and they growl, and they're like, you know, the bad forces are kind of sensing they're losing battle. And this emergence of a lot of this right-wing extremism and, you know, Nazism and all that kind of stuff is really like their last ditch. They're cornered and they're snarling, and it's their last ditch effort to puff themselves up, and that things should get better after this hump. He didn't, you know, it could be a decade or 2 decades. I mean, it could be a long period of bad. I don't know. He didn't really want to, guess at that. But so that's sort of the stuff he was talking about. And he said that he's like on the board. He was one of the people that like elected the new big cheese.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
That I had not heard before.
I hadn't heard the timeline attached to the change, and I hadn't heard, but it, you know, it really doesn't surprise me about Tom, because I think that he's involved in so many bigger things than we can even dream of.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. I mean, if I'm totally honest, it's when I start thinking, wow, this sounds like crazy. Like it starts to get so, you know, it's so beyond my comprehension that I start to feel a little uncomfortable with it. I trust Tom implicitly, but at the same time, it also is like, I'm like, man, you know, it's good that he doesn't want to put this on like his podcast.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people could start being like, okay, this sounds wacky.
I mean, the other, I've heard somebody else talk about it, and what they were saying, that as the vibration sort of rises, that raised vibration bothers people of lower quality, and they react.
Yes, that sounds like a really good way to phrase it.
In not a very good way.
Yeah. So anyway, so that was but it sounds like AUM is above the big cheese, and the big cheese is really, you know, in charge of physical material reality.
Isn't it? I think what I'm fascinated by sometimes is that the timeline on this stuff is that change wasn't that long ago.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like something that happened centuries ago.
Yeah.
You're talking, what, 70 years?
Yeah. Well, not even, because Berlin Wall coming down, if he says that was, well, I don't know how long it took for that change to then result in it. But yeah, you're right, 50 to 70 years for sure. Yeah, it's nutty. And it's just nutty to think of there being that kind of a structure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's beyond me. Yeah, I echo that. So yeah, that when he starts talking like that, I'm like, this is too, I can't believe. Like I need to, I can't even like.
Yeah.
I know, but that's to me part of the stuff that you wouldn't get anywhere else. You actually have to go to one of those and be, you know, in front of him in a face-to-face sort of audience for him to start talking about those things, because you're not going to see that stuff on any podcast or any recording. It's like the extra gravy you get for going.
And for having people, so this was Vanessa was telling Suzanne that Donna and I kind of adopted this young man named Michael while we were there, and the three of us palled around a lot. And he has he been in touch? His name's Michael Hunter. I've got to put him in touch with you around all the organization stuff. He has literally watched 1,000 hours of Tom's videos. I think he's even done some cataloging and stuff, and he's a computer guy. And so I was like, I don't know how far the cataloging group has gotten, but he seems like a really good person to have on board in doing all the sort of organizational stuff, because it sounds like he's probably done some of it anyway. And he's a 37-year-old computer guy. So he
Yeah.
So I'll put you in touch with him and see.
Cool.
He said he was interested in helping.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, we need all the help we can get with the time stamping. That's what takes them longest to do. So
Yeah.
very cool.
Anyway, so he was the one that was asking a lot of these questions, because he had, he was like, you hinted a lot of this stuff. I want to understand it. And so Tom just kept on going. It was one of those times when, it's like Pam's going, last question. And everybody, and Tom just keeps going.
Very cool. So did anything else stand out from this first chapter?
No, I mean, I think for me it was really, he's just trying to impress us that we might be the center of our own life, but we're really not the center of anything else, given the big picture. So.
Yeah. Just reading this. Yeah, and then I guess something that stood out on the second page at the very bottom there is where the last paragraph, he says, because he's talking about how infinitesimal this reality is in light of the big picture. And then the last paragraph on the second page, he goes, even if we are more important than the statistics indicate, there is no advantage in knowing the fact, and there may be considerable disadvantages. Because such knowledge would constitute a serious disadvantage if it encouraged ego to invent ground theories of our special importance, which could in turn lead us to see everything else as relatively unimportant and insignificant. I like that because it just reminds me to stay humble. Yeah, and then it ties in actually to the very last line that he says in this paragraph, in this chapter. He goes, lighthearted fun is an important component of learning. And so when I don't take myself so seriously and don't think I'm so super important and just know that I'm, just an average person doing the best I can, I really lighten up with myself, and I'm able to just kind of, have fun with life and not take things so seriously.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, and it's not in the book, but when he talked about the change in the big cheese, the first time I heard that, I was really astounded, like, oh my God, you can get to that level and you still make mistakes. Like, you're not, I guess the learning still continues at every level, because you think, like you look at Tom and you think, well, he would surely never make big mistakes, or somebody like the big cheese wouldn't. And then to hear that, in fact, they're still making mistakes is, well, you don't like to have the mistakes happen, but I guess it just shows that, any mistake I make is not going to be like screwing up a whole physical matter reality.
Yeah. Yeah, it's relatable, right? I remember Tom talking about how when he first started working with in physics, like after college, and what was he doing? He was prepping, I think, generals on some new system. And he had to give this big talk. And he said in the beginning, when he first started doing that, he would feel nervous. And I was like, you would feel nervous? And he's like, yeah, because, when you're first doing something and you don't know how to do it, you don't know how to best articulate the information so that this group of people will receive it, yeah, I felt nervous in the beginning. And then as you practice it and you learn how to do it, then he's like, then those nerves go away. But that to me was the first time I had heard him share any fear that he had. Because what's there is the fear of, not doing it right, not being enough there. And so it was just, it helped me to see that he's also had those fears and done the work to overcome them too, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's super interesting point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's the first chapter. That was a short chapter.
Yeah.
And then the next one, uncertainty and manipulating the future with intent, the nature of psi phenomena, measurement, and validation, taking the path of knowledge. So it's cool. He goes into the 3 paths in this chapter. I totally forgot about that he talked about it in the book.
Yeah.
Anything on the first page there?
Nope, not for me.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, I don't know why. I just had the last paragraph, the first sentence. To create an entity or bounded system, one must impose constraints upon some energy form, such as physical mass or non-physical consciousness. These constraints define and maintain the entity. If the constraints are removed, the entity will disintegrate, dissipate, or dematerialize. Yeah, I'm not sure why I had that. Yeah, I guess just to understand, I don't know, I guess for a lot of my friends who kind of come from this like spiritual community, a lot of them feel like they're stuck here. They're like, I don't want to come. They're, after this life, I'm never coming back here. I'm done with this reality. I hate being stuck here. But it's like we need these constraints because they're what give us these unique life experiences, right? Yeah, and it's not to look at it as a curse, but to look at it as a really cool opportunity where we get to come here and play. And we'll never have this opportunity again. So just to be appreciative and grateful, not to feel like we're damned,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a matter of perception. It's just like rules and boundaries that you give kids, and they're like, oh, I can't wait till I grow up, and then I won't have any of those rules, and I won't have to do this or do that, and they don't. It's actually for the good of them that you do these things, and then as they get older, they look back and go, man, I wish I was a kid again because now I've got all these responsibilities, and I have to.
Yeah, right. Totally. That's so funny. As you're saying that, what was coming to me as as we grow up, the quality of our consciousness, we can transcend these constraints in terms of we can go and explore the larger consciousness system. We can take on new constraints. And then I'm thinking though, I wonder if then when we're growing up, we're like, oh, I wish I was ignorant again. Like, I just wish I could have that experience where I would stay in my body and I would only know that this is the truth,
Yeah, because as you grow, the responsibilities that you have grow. The more knowledge you have, the more is like, to quote Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. And sometimes to be ignorant is blissful because you don't even know about any of that stuff. But as you grow up, you're expected to have more responsibility and to be, make better choices.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah, right now we're not expected of much because we're not really that so.
It also that way, the thing that you just said, the constraints define and maintain the entity, also just, I think one of the things, you know how it is, you listen to Tom, you listen to his tapes, you read his books, and you just, sometimes you're like, oh, okay, like I get something now and I sort of felt like so much of his book, which is why it's so long and part of it challenging for me, I don't know if about others, but is that he's trying to explain why things are in a way almost that satisfies his level of proof, I need a lot less proof than he does because I'm not as smart as he is, and I don't have as many physics, questions as he has. But a lot of what he's doing is trying to answer physics questions that someone that's more knowledgeable than I am might have, which is why I think, gosh, you could really turn this into a small book if you did it, if you targeted it at people where you weren't trying to answer all those questions. And this is one of those things where I think these constraints, and it seems to me that a lot of the book is explaining why it has to be this way. But, at the end of the day, I'm good with, look, if there weren't rules, there wouldn't be order and you wouldn't be forced to make choices. Like it kind of comes down
he's
to
talked
like
about
game,
that before.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
He's talked about that before, that the book is for those people who, it really is for those people who take a lot more to convince, who are just like, no, I don't get that, versus the people who are like, oh, no, I'm already on board. Before I even started reading the book, I was already on board.
Yeah. Or you can just explain to me it in the simple concept, and that's logical to me and I can accept it. I don't have the physics questions that are lined up behind it that a lot of other people might have, or not a lot, but a select few might have. Anyway, so that just, again, it's like, yes, this is why it's like this, because it's designed for us to be able to have choices.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he is really just trying to reach everybody, as many people as he can, and trying to articulate the information in multiple different ways so that it can land with multiple different people.
Totally, yeah.
So let's see, over onto the next page of that chapter. Anything on that second page? I just had the second paragraph there. So I guess towards the end there, where he says, however, with the attributes of consciousness, a sentient entity can create its own internal constraints. And then the internal constraints that a sentient entity typically imposes upon itself will inevitably limit the evolutionary potential of that entity. Some self-imposed constraints may appear to serve a temporary purpose and some are obviously more dysfunctional, unprofitable than others, but all must eventually be removed by the entity if it is to actualize its full potential. And then further on the next paragraph, he goes in the middle, when you are caught in a belief trap, you create an additional internal constraint that further limits the capacity and function of your consciousness. Creating or maintaining unprofitable internal constraints that limit your personal consciousness requires energy and increases the entropy of your consciousness. And so then I remember asking him, we were talking about Rupert Sheldrake actually, and how, are you guys familiar with his model, the morphogenic field? No? Okay. Okay, so I guess we were talking about field, like, you know how he says that, was it Wheeler? He said that at first we thought it was particles, and then we thought it was information, and now we're seeing that it's all first it was particles, then it was fields, and now it's information.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the scientists are stuck in this fields realm where they think, it's electromagnetic field. Rupert has the morphogenic field. And so I was asking him, like, well, do they think that they're beyond this kind of materialistic view, or what are they thinking? And he's like, no, yeah, they think they're looking at things kind of beyond materialism, but they're not, because their fundamental understanding of reality is so rooted in materialism that it's this belief that they just can't remove it. I'm like, yeah. But I'm stuck there too, though, Tom. I'm like, that's why I don't have these out-of-body experiences and stuff, is because I'm so rooted in materialism. Like, I get it intellectually, and I don't want to have that belief, but, like, how do I remove it? How do I get rid of it? And he said, you can't. He's like, you just need to work with it. And I'm like, okay. So how come so many other people, like when we go to TMI and stuff, how come they have OBEs if they're rooted in materialism? I mean, I guess they're not rooted in materialism.
Yeah.
If they're able to OBE. Did you have any OBEs, Sylvia, when you were at TMI?
No, I never do.
Yeah, me neither. How
The
about
only,
you?
the only thing I've ever been able to do is remote viewing. I get nothing on anything else, but when we do the remote viewing thing, remember last time I had a thing, and this time I was really good. And so it's really strange that I feel like it's like I'm like meditating. I'm like, okay, I'm meditating, this is great, but I'm not really, I have trouble with everything else that he gives us to do except for remote viewing.
I do feel like when I go that my vibrational state is higher. And the last time I went, not that I have any OBEs or am especially successful at anything else, but it definitely, it's like you can feel the higher vibrational state. But I guess very stuck in the material world as well. And I understand what you say. I mean, I understand it intellectually, but to really embrace it is like, there's such a block there, because you look at your body and you look at the world around you and you can feel things and you can see things and hear things. And it's like, how can this not be real?
Yeah. Tom said to me it's because I have an expectation of what it's going to be like. Because, when we go to these things, like we hear everybody else, the majority of the people there are having these freaking amazing experiences where they're like going to all these different realities and dimensions. And he said, now you have an expectation. It's going to be this way. But then he's like, but when you get into point consciousness, because you have that expectation's not happening, you dismiss everything else. You dismiss the feeling. You're probably just more, you feel things rather than are visual. But then whatever you feel, you dismiss because you're not seeing it the way that you've heard others describe it. It's like you need to let go of that expectation.
But do you really think that the majority of people have those fantastic experiences, or is it just a few?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm probably skewing it. Going, how everybody else does it but me?
Yeah. I think it's like 50-50. That's my guess.
Yeah.
I'm not even sure it's that high. I think that there's it's rather less than that have some truly amazing experience, and the rest of the people in the room going, oh my God, how come I can't have that?
Yeah, I guess I fall back on my very first experience with any of this was at the Monroe Institute with Bill Bowman. And every single participant there had been having these out-of-body experiences their entire life, and they wanted to understand it, and that's why they were there. So
did you go to more than one of Bill's workshops?
No, I went to one, and then I questioned a lot of the stuff he was saying, and that's why I went back and I did one with Tom. And then,
because I was at the Bill one with you, and I didn't have any of those experiences.
Oh, you didn't?
No.
You were at the Bill one with me?
Yes, that's where I first met you.
Okay, see? So how I skew it, I'm like, everybody there except for me.
Because it wasn't everybody there. There were a few people, but it was not everybody there.
The only other person I was like, everybody there except for me and this old dude, Chet, I think. I thought it was me and remember the really old guy?
No, I was there and I didn't.
Chet came on my Gateway experience, I think. He's like from the South or something.
I don't know, he's really old. Like
yeah.
And tall.
But and also here's the other thing. I think a lot of the people that have these, here's where I've come out on that question, like, why don't I have it? Is that I feel like, if one of the things that Tom said that struck me this time was he was talking about how, because someone was saying, well, if there's all this other stuff and the universe wants us to get to other levels of consciousness, why don't they just show us more stuff? And he was like, are you kidding me? They show us stuff all the time. There are crop circles. There's UFOs. There's, there's ESP. There's people can bend spoons. There's all, all this stuff is happening. People have out of body experiences. And so it sort of sounded like, in a way, they were, if you think of us as this virtual reality game, I had the sense that these random events were being tossed into the game to see how it would affect the game. And maybe you and I just haven't been chosen to have one of these weird random events, but that in some ways they're kind of meaningless. It's just to show us that it's there. And I think you don't need to do it to progress. And in fact, he even said, like, you know, sometimes if there's like some kid falls into a well or something, and some is in a small town, and some mysterious stranger comes by and pulls the kid out of a well. Nobody ever figures out who that mysterious stranger is. He's like, probably was just a non-player entity came and, you know, presented themselves as a person to this kid because it wasn't that kid's time. So they yank the kid out of the well and then they go off into the game.
One of the explanations I've heard for that before is that a lot of those things happen to people who need to be woken up a little bit. So the people who are already sort of more believing in it, or, you know, belief isn't a good word, but who are already thinking in that way, don't need to proof. They're already thinking that. It's for the people who are completely clueless, and to sort of tap them on the shoulder and go, hey, maybe there's something out there that you weren't thinking of before.
Yeah.
So if you're already in that place, how much tapping on the shoulder do you need? You're already looking.
And it's not always pleasant. Like this young man, Michael, he's had terrifying experiences for 6 years, like terrifying. Like it has not been good for him. And Tom keeps telling him it's a fear test. I'm like, well, I am very thankful I'm not being given out-of-body fear tests. Do you know what I mean? He's struggling. And Tom was just saying, you know, you just got to release the fear, you know, he'll have these experiences where he's like hanging on a cliff, looking down in a chasm, and it feels 100% real. And Tom says, just let go, see what happens. And the guy's like, it actually feels like I'm literally on a cliff hanging down. It doesn't feel like hazy, you know, experience. So he'll sit there for 6 hours, like holding on, you know, feeling like he's wide awake when he should be sleeping. Like it's really terrifying. So, you know, it's easy to say let go, but if you feel like you're really on the edge of a cliff hanging on, that's hard. So anyway, I'm kind of at this point a little grateful. It sounds really scary.
Yeah, the fear will get us one way or the other. If it's not getting us in PMR, it'll get us an NPMR, right?
Yeah, for real.
Yeah.
And what is the antidote to fear? It's courage.
Okay. My Wheaties.
Anything? What are we on? I guess we're on the 3rd page now.
Yeah.
What I had highlighted was the primary work of consciousness is to more effectively organize itself, to take charge of its own evolution, and to increase its overall profitability through self-modification or growth. So ever so slowly, I think 2 steps forward, 1 step back for me, but
Yeah. Where was that you just pointed out?
That is it's the 3rd paragraph and the 2nd sentence in the 3rd paragraph.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I had that highlighted here.
Yeah, and then with that, if you go just above it, the last sentence of the previous paragraph where it says entropy reduction is the name of the game at all levels with all dimensions of this fractal. And it just, again, to me, helps me focus on incremental change. Like I want to take the big leaps, but you know, if I can just each day be one teeny iota better than the previous day, or at least strive to be, intend it.
Yeah.
So it's funny. My grandson, my oldest grandson, is 15, and he was kidding around one day, and he's like, "Oh, the world is just a virtual reality." And I said, "Yeah, I believe that." And he's like, what do you mean? I was just kidding. And I've been trying to explain to him some of this stuff about improving the quality of your consciousness and lowering your entropy. And he's just like, believes we live in a virtual reality. And
yeah, that's cool. It's great to give them these ideas young.
Yeah, we have daily, well, not daily, but every once in a while I try to, explain to him about his choices and whatever. But that is a generation, though, where the concept of virtual reality, I think, is much more common to them. It's not as foreign.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So maybe they won't struggle as much with the materialism, potentially.
Yeah.
Yeah,
At
'cause
my
they're
age,
growing
it's
up.
like virtual reality stuff didn't come along for, I don't know, 45 years. But he's 15, and that's been his whole life, video games and things like that. So I think that generation has a much different view of, I think they accept it just much more readily. Like,
Yeah.
oh, it's like a video game. Okay, I get that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
They also get taught in physics in high school if they pursue science, even if they just get to, one, like honors physics, doesn't even have to be AP, but they teach them a lot of the basics so that they understand that, that the option set is a wave rather than, I mean, when I asked my younger son, my 17-year-old, like, do you understand, this? Or I was asking some of the physics questions because my husband got me a physics book that is someone that actually believes is discounting the non-material reality portion. And I thought it would be really interesting for me to read, not because he's trying to convince me, he's on board, but he just thought it would be an interesting way to see how they lay out the other side of the argument. And it actually has been really useful. It hasn't in any way swayed me in the other direction, but it's been really useful because he articulates beautifully even the foundations for this stuff, like some of the double slit experiment, all that kind of stuff. Anyway, I was asking my younger son about it, and he was like, oh yeah, it's the wave, not a, and I was like, okay, so, fundamental basic physics does have now, which in a way that we didn't get taught, some of these basic quantum physics. So it's kind of cool.
But I think that's what, when Tom talks about like the foundation's been laid for people to make that shift, is you had to get to the place where they understood what a virtual reality was. And
Yeah.
so now that they have so much of that, like we went to Universal a couple weeks ago, and a lot of the rides now are very video game like they have this, they'll move the car and stuff, but it's not like the roller coaster where you're physically going along this ride. Like the car, the thing you're in doesn't move much, and it's what's happening on the screen and how it's presented to you, and it's very much like video game type. And so this is a generation that they all understand that now. So the concepts are,
Yeah.
like the foundation has been laid. We've gotten technologically to the place where we understand what that is. So now they're trying to prove it or not prove it. And I just think it's a place where you can make a big shift from a cultural place
Yeah.
instead of just, individuals.
Agreed.
Yeah, I agree too. So back to this chapter. Anything else on that page, the third page? I had the second paragraph actually right before we're kind of moving up. Right before the last point that Sylvia pointed out in that same paragraph, in the middle there, he says each individuated consciousness generates its own unique path toward increasing or decreasing profitability. Yet all are expressions that reflect the process and purpose of the whole. Yeah, I like that because it helps me to appreciate everybody in their own unique way, no matter where they are or what they seem to be doing, and not to judge people on their path because I don't know what their path has been like and why they're doing things that they're doing, right? And just to honor that, that they're working through things in their own unique way that's helping us as a whole, helping them. Everybody has that fundamental process within them, right? Everybody does want to grow and improve. It's just we do it differently, and some take longer than others, and that's okay because we need every single one of us to have our own expression, our own individual expression of evolution. That just reminds me of it. Gives me more.
Yeah, for sure. I love that sentence.
Yeah. Anything else on this page before we move on? Yeah, the very last paragraph, I guess he kind of ties it in. The fewer internal dysfunctional constraints, such as fear, ego, needs, and beliefs, that limit a particular consciousness, the lower its associated entropy and the more effectively it can populate the most profitable states available to it. The drive or urge to be helpful to and care about others, love, is an innate property of low entropy consciousness. A low entropy consciousness is an effective and powerful consciousness. Consequently, a low entropy individuated consciousness represents an effective individual with considerable personal power. Yeah, it's so funny because oftentimes we think that love is weak, if we just allow and accept things, that's weak. But if it's coming from a genuine and a real authentic place where I love and I care, and therefore I am able to accept people as they are, then that is really powerful. I think I'm struggling with this in my own life, though, in that I'm always looking at, like, yeah, I want to love and accept people as they are, but then I don't want to be a doormat and allow behavior that's unacceptable, right? So it's like, it's this kind of this fine line, like, when do I need to be forceful and assert myself, and when do I just kind of just accept and let things be as they are. So I guess it comes to trusting my intuition on that. Sorry, Sylvia, you're going to say something?
No, I just so feel that. Like, I struggle with this. I've got a really lovely husband, so I hate bringing it up because it sounds like I'm being so critical. But, if, for example, just in terms of, I think we fall into very male-female patterns in terms of household responsibilities. And, I don't want to be angry and demanding and have needs. At the same time, it's like, well, if I don't, then that means I do everything. Is that okay? Like, and Tom always says, he even said, it only takes one person to make a good relationship, because if you love and just worry about the other person's needs, they'll be happy. And if taking care of them makes you happy, you'll be happy. And I'm like, I am struggling with that one. I am struggling with that one. And yeah, and he even I think he's started saying, to not have fears, beliefs, ego, or needs. And not having needs is really, I'm struggling with even the concept of that. I'm trying to understand it. But yeah, how is that? And then if you tie that to the thing where he said that the bad people kind of gained a foothold because they were willing to, be nastier, go places that the good people weren't, and that created an imbalance. Well, okay, doesn't that counter that? So I'm struggling with this whole thing too, is about how do you, not be a doormat is one way of expressing it. How do you balance that between being loving and giving, and yet figuring out what you're comfortable with and having boundaries? I'm totally confused.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, there is a balance to caring for others, but if you care for others to the point that you're exhausted and you don't care for yourself, then what good are you there? So there's this balance of, yes, to help others, but you also take care of yourself. But where does that slip over into it's about me or ego or?
Yeah. There was something I read the other day from Tom, actually, and it was something along the lines of, when somebody is being negative and you're not coming from a place of fear or ego, you're coming from a place of love, you're not reactive. So somebody's acting out in a negative way, like they've got a lot of fear and ego, maybe their ego's taking them over and they're like yelling or just being rude, or maybe not doing the things that they normally do, like it maybe still be in your case, or maybe they're not like doing dishes and stuff. I don't know how it is.
Yeah, whatever.
But,
yeah.
When you're coming from a place of love, you're not going to be in this reactive mode. Instead, what you're going to do is you're going to think, wow, they're coming from a very negative place. I wonder what's going on for them in their world, and how can I help them and help them to be more positive. And so you're coming at it from this whole, just this different intention and this different feel to it. And I feel like if you were to truly come, because I'm not there yet, obviously I try to be, but I'm not. But I feel like once you are in that place, that just the energy is so different. There's no tension there. And then the other person that's involved in that relationship or dynamic, they can feel that you're really there and you care about them, that then they feel safe to be able to change themselves if they so need to do so.
I think that's a great theory, and it's interesting. And again, I'll use a specific example of my husband, who's generally, I mean, everybody loves him because he's so sweet and easygoing, and he doesn't appear to have a lot of ego. Like he leaves a lot of room for others. But the truth is, I know him really, really well. There's a huge amount of self-centeredness that isn't selfish. Like he's willing to share and everything, but it's all, part of it is in the Everybody Loves Blair story. He's figured out that everybody loves him like this. And so if ever I bring up anything, even when I'm in that good place, I think there are times when I'm in that loving place going, it's not that good for him to be this self-centered. He has to be more aware of others. And he does that more when he's outside of the house than when he's inside of the house. And it would be an evolution for him to realize he thinks he has very little ego, but actually I can see it. And I'm sure he can see things about me that I'm not seeing about myself. But I can see that there's a lot of ego there, even if a lot of that's being expressed with kindness and all sorts of other things. So criticism or anything even he implies as criticism, no matter how beautifully and gently and kindly delivered and genuinely delivered, he gets really reactive. And so it's a fascinating thing. I may have to just accept that this is it. He's a lovely man with good intentions and good morals and whatever, but he's got a lot of ego wrapped up. Anyway, it's interesting. So I haven't figured it out yet. Because I feel like I have been in places where I'm like, and gradually what that's meant is I've shifted towards, again, just doing more for him. And I'm like, well, that doesn't feel even good for him. Even if I forget about the fact that I'm not cool with this, it kind of doesn't feel good for him. So it's trying to just figure it out. It's complicated. People sometimes have very tightly wound stories, as I'm sure I do too. It's easier to see other people's.
I'm missing the connection of how that translates to you doing more for him.
Well, because he's very giving outside of the home. And so he always has time for everybody else and everything else. And then let's face it, he's retired and is a rowing coach. Okay. And yet. Aww.
Say hi to Sylvia and Suzanne.
We miss you today.
I know.
Not on the video.
He had to leave the book club because of his dissertation. I'll let him speak for himself.
Good luck with it.
My sisters, I just sometimes, I have to prioritize, and I'm reading through probably 150 pages a night, and so if I allocate time to the book club, that's obviously taking away from my dissertation. So,
cosmic timing, man. Cosmic timing. It'll happen when it's right.
Mm-hmm. No, and that's the thing, is that this school is good. The school is finite. What we're talking about is infinite.
Yes.
Love you, babe. Good to see you, my sisters.
Yeah.
Peace. Bye, baby.
Yeah. Anyway, so he will he'll have some girl that's worrying about her college application call in the middle of dinner, and I'm like, you can't. Of course, you could text her and say, I'll call you in an hour. Everything that's outside becomes immediately necessary. And this is a job he doesn't even get paid for. Let's be really, really clear about what's happening here. And yet he's almost spending more time on it than when he had this really high-powered job. And so during the high-powered job, when he was bringing in the money and we had an agreement about how things were going to be allocated, it felt fair. Now I'm like, he has so much time, and now it's a choice about how he allocates it. And I'm now working more outside of the home, so I want to shift the experience. So when I'm just kind and let him be, he basically just doesn't really do anything. That's the tricky part.
Okay, now that makes sense. Yeah.
So he's not being thoughtful to me. He's being very thoughtful to a lot of other people, but he's not being thoughtful here.
And you've shared that with him, and you've told him.
Yeah, so many times. And he's so wrapped up into his own interpretation of himself as a kind and giving person. There's really hard for him to hear that. And so he gets very defensive no matter how I bring it up. Even if I'm like, look, Blair, I don't know if you realize, but this is how it makes me feel, and it'd be really helpful. It doesn't matter. He hears.
He just gets defensive?
Yeah, super. He's he's super kind and giving and wildly defensive. It's so much a part of who he is. I'm the nicest guy on the planet,
Therefore, if you're criticizing me, there must be something wrong with you.
So,
That's where.
I don't know, Sylvia, the thought that just came into my head was when
Yeah.
I'm always talking to my grandson about when he talks about what's going on in the world and how something happened to him and it wasn't fair and whatever, and somebody didn't do something the way he thought they should do it. And it's like, who do you have control over?
Yeah.
And it's like, myself. Then let their actions go. They're
Yeah.
going to do what they do, and you only have control of yourself.
Yeah.
Stop.
Which I do most of the time, which is why it ends up being that, you know, that's how you end up doing the lion's share. I've got to just figure out, do I just accept it that I'm just going to do it and he's going to, but it doesn't feel good for him. Honestly, if I'm really honest with myself and I really think about what's good for him, it doesn't feel good for him because, you know, he's got a lot of ego that he doesn't recognize, and it would be helpful for him to recognize that. It would make him better. And you know, I guess it's not good for me to feel like in that almost subservient position. So I'm just trying to figure out how to recognize, you know, and there may be no answer. I may have to just let it go and be like, fine, I'll do all the dishes or whatever it is.
Maybe pay somebody to do the work you don't want to do and that he's not willing to do.
Yeah.
There you go. That's a solution.
Yeah.
Might be a band-aid solution though. It might just be a band-aid solution.
Yeah. Anyway, but that's the thing that's you know, forget about the details. Just that notion of when do you like
know when to hold them, know when to fold them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
it's funny. Yeah, go ahead.
I don't know the situation. There's some people in my life, my parents, who are so negative about everything and not willing to do any kind of self-improvement or change because, well, that's how it was in the era when they were born, and so that's just how it is, and they don't have to accept people. They don't have to they're just so very narrow-minded and completely unwilling to open that up even the tiniest bit.
Yeah.
And
my mom's like that. I have a hard time with that. But on her, I'm working on just plain acceptance.
Yeah, I just have to let it go because it's crazy making. But
yeah, it's funny. This talk seems to be around boundaries, right? Like what's okay and what's not okay. And for me, in relationship with those I really love, like obviously with Bobby and also with my kids, I find the boundaries get blurred for me, and I don't always know when to be assertive. But Bobby's really good with boundaries, like really good, like really clear on what's okay and what's not okay. And so I remember him asserting his boundaries with me. I think I was just like, my ego was coming up and I was being a bitch. And then he was like, immediately like, that's not okay, right? And afterwards, after the whole incident, I remember reflecting and being like, I'm really glad that he asserted that because that's not okay. And I don't want to perpetuate that behavior. So it was cool for me to be on the opposite end of receiving that firm, assertive boundary, because then it helped me to realize that I need to assert myself more when I'm going to then put a boundary in place and recognize that, you know, being firm like that is not always coming from ego and fear and the wrong thing to do. And that's just being acceptant and allowing things to happen. Sometimes that's the wrong thing to do because then it's condoning bad behavior. Right?
Agreed. And I love when people think too. I love that. I'm like you. I'm like, you know, that's right. It's good. Someone just called me on my shit. That's like helpful. Yeah.
And I think some of that might be gender based as well, because women are really culturally raised to be more subservient to men who are raised to be, you know, assertive and like in control. And I think that's so it's sometimes hard you have to overcome the gender roles as well. But I know that, I mean, yesterday my granddaughter was going to the beach and she wanted some particular bag to take. And I spend all my time and energy. Well, what about this one? And what about this one? And what about this one? And, you know, trying to solve all of her problems. And I think it was my daughter was like, she'll figure it out. Just, it's okay. And it's like, what? Like, I'm trying to help her. And I think the line that gets blurred for me sometimes is just helping too much.
Yeah.
I have to just learn how to step back, because part of my ego is like, well, I've done this before and I know how to do it and I can really help them. And, you know, and it's like, well, that's probably true, but then they're never going to learn to do it for themselves.
Yeah.
So maybe doing that is actually more harmful. And that was a little thing, but I think I see that pattern over and over where I'm always trying to make their lives better, make their decisions better, but in fact, I'm doing it for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. I grew up with, my mom was like a housewife and stay-at-home mom, go to daycare and stuff. And so she did everything and cleaned my room and made my bed, did my laundry, cooked everything. Okay. So today I'm a messy motherfucker, man. Really messy. And Bobby grew up with the complete opposite way, where he had to do everything since he was like freaking 4 years old. He was washing dishes and doing chores, and now he's a total neat freak. And I see it, and I see it in our parenting too. Is with the kids, I'm doing the same thing that my mom did, where I was like, oh, here, let me do it for you. Let me do this. Let me do this. But then it's creating these lazy kids. Whereas with him, he's like, nope, you guys go do this. And I'm like, they can't do it. He's like, yes, they can. And then he makes them do it. And now they're able to be more self-sufficient and not end up turning out like I am.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny how we're shaped by our upbringing, and then how that then influences our own parenting style based on how we were parented, right?
That's real.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, much tougher on my, that's just a quick reflection. I was much tougher on my older son in that than my younger son, because my younger son just needs more sleep. They just, between the two of them, one kid needs 3 hours more sleep than the other. And so I can see he's tired. And so I'm like, so I was good with the older one. Like he always had to, you know, clean his room and do laundry and da-da-da-da. And on the younger one, I'm like, oh, and it's a physical, like he actually doesn't seem to have enough waking hours in the week to get everything done, but he's going to have to figure it out anyway. If he's going to continue to be the kind of person that needs more sleep, then this is what he has to deal with. But it's just it's something I'm like wrestling with. I'm like, oh, when the kid looks like he's going to collapse, do I say, fold your laundry? Doesn't feel appropriate. So anyway, I digress.
We all did there. What are we on? Like the 4th page, I guess?
Yeah.
Okay, anything on that page? Yeah. I don't know, the very bottom, I guess second to last paragraph, last sentence. Fortunately, the intent and attitude, mental focus of the body's owner has the greatest potential impact. Unfortunately, this attitude is often driven by its fear and the opinions and fears of other.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess what he's talking about, he's talking about energy is healing, right?
Yeah.
I like that. Fortunately, the intent and attitude of my focus is greater, has the greatest potential impact than anything else. So, you know, like no other entities or negative forces. It's actually my intent, my mental. So it just helps me understand like how much in the driver's seat I am of my own life, and that nobody can persuade me as long as I get rid of my own fear and ego. Because if I have that fear, there are others to manipulate me, right?
Or even if you have fears, then you're gonna, you know, you can create things that aren't good for you.
Yeah. Exactly. The next page, just like in the middle there, the second paragraph, last sentence. When one removes the challenge, one removes the opportunity as well. So that's about healing other people when it's not necessarily the best thing to do, because sometimes people have that impairment because they need to learn something in order to grow and evolve. And I think he's talked about too, you know, like people have asked me to heal them, and then I heal them, and then, you know, a week later something else comes up for them because that's something they needed. They needed that for their growth.
Yeah.
I think later on in that page where he talks about positive thinking and putting energy into wishes or prayer can be useful and effective, but their effects are not very potent or predictable. Because
I see.
The second to last paragraph.
Right, the last sentence of the second to last paragraph. The conscious intent supporting them is typically not well focused, coherent, or aware of the larger issues. So just think he's talking of, the difference between sort of wishing a thing to happen as opposed to being focused and having a clear intent and actually having the ability to change an outcome through the use of NPMR.
Yeah.
Yeah, that focused intent is super important to have. And that's why I think often, because, you hear him talk about how it's not always helpful to heal people. And then I'm like, so then why do we have these healing groups and stuff? Like, if it's not helpful, we should just let people, do their own thing. And he said that, well, it's because it helps you. It helps you to focus your intent, right? And then also, if this person's getting all this positive energy sent that way, that helps them too. It helps them at least feel better, feel good about themselves.
Yeah. I like the visual on the very last sentence on this page. I just like the visual. I felt like I could use that. It's the difference between feeling the gentle warmth of the sun through a window and using a large and powerful magnifying glass to enable that same sunlight to burn holes through whatever blocks its path. Just that notion of, the quality of your tent can be, gentle and warm, or it can like burn a hole. I like that as a visual.
I love that. And then it goes on to say, it is exactly the same sunlight radiating heat through a piece of glass in both cases, but different methodologies of interacting with the sun's energy produce very different results.
Yeah.
I love that line. Yeah, different methodologies. And that discovering our own methodology to direct that energy is the best practice for us, right? So how do we get that focused intent? Like, what's the best way for us? Is it through meditation? Is it through hiking, being in nature? For me, it's being in nature. I just recognize lately it's being connected in nature helps me have that focused intent to be just so present and in the moment.
Yeah, I've even tried meditating while I'm walking because I'm just bad at it sitting still. Whereas when I'm out moving about, and I almost feel like sometimes I do a bit better when I'm out in nature.
Mm-hmm.
But like not running into things and stuff is also a challenge. So pluses and minuses.
I didn't have anything else on that page. Did you guys?
Mm-mm.
I had lots on the next page. Would you guys have anything on the next page? 195. I don't know what it is for you, Suzanne.
I think it might be 445.
445. It starts at the top. Physical matter, mystical belief requires existence.
It starts on the top as what?
Physical matter, the first two words.
Oh, actually, it's matter.
Oh, okay.
Physical got left onto the other page, yeah.
Yeah. What do you guys have there on that page?
On that page, I've got the fact is your existence extends beyond its physical manifestation in PMR. I don't know. That because I'm so rooted in the material, it's helpful, I think, for me to understand that it's not just what I have here, that there's another part to me somewhere else, non-physical, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And then further on in the next paragraph is steady effort and due diligence eventually will produce clear and consistent results for anyone. I have a little problem with the steady effort. It's like it's in spurts, Oh, I'll do it for a while and then it fades away, and then no, I'm going to get back to it, and then it fades away. So
yes.
Yeah, I loved that part that you just said, Suzanne. The steady effort and due diligence eventually will produce clear and consistent results for anyone. The limiting constraints which are within your power to remove are not constraints placed on your consciousness by fate, biology, or from outside. They are internal constraints of your own making that you have created with your belief, ego, and fear. Your natural mind does not limit or constrain your NPMR experiences. The unnatural mind that you and your culture have created is the problem. And then further up on that page, the first paragraph, last sentence, he says, when you view PMR as a universal reality, everything beyond PMR vanishes before your eyes as your vision contracts to perceive the little picture exclusively. So I'm hoping that intellectually, at least, we're not viewing PMR as the universal reality. Intellectually, we've got the big picture somewhat in our minds and our intellect. And so that because we have this awareness, eventually we'll be able to have the big picture come into focus more.
Well, and farther on in the page, it says, learning how to be sentient in NPMR does not represent a new skill that must be mastered. It simply occurs spontaneously after self-imposed constraints are removed. It is an unlearning that is required.
Mm-hmm.
So I've not learned yet how to unlearn.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And then the very last paragraph on that, he says, viewing a clear picture of the larger reality will, for most of us, require stepping outside normal habituated thought patterns and cultural beliefs. Unlearning or escaping old patterns must precede learning new ones. So, that's what we're doing now, is we're creating new thoughts by reading this and discussing it. So we're breaking those old habituated thought patterns just by having this discussion that we're having now. We're planting the seed, new patterns sprout.
Yeah.
And it takes time because, we've spent more than half of our lives creating these old thought patterns. So we'll spend the rest of our lifetime creating new ones.
Yeah. And it's habit. I mean, I've spent so much time thinking about the power of habit, even irrespective of this, but just even when my son was having learning disabilities, just certain habits, how you could break an old habit and create a new habit. It just can help you so much. And I feel like part of this is a habit. We have a habit of thinking of things in a material way, or we might have a habit of being reactive in certain situations. So to the point that you can practice whatever thing you're working on until it becomes habit, and then eventually it becomes the part of who you are.
Right.
Like at first it goes from the intellectual into your being in that sort of way.
Yeah, it's a habit, forming new habits, right? So mine is, I want to reprogram myself or rewire myself so that I'm not so reactive to just basic statements that are made by my partner. So last night, at the end of the day, Bobby was folding the laundry, and as I'm going into the bathroom, I'm like, "Oh, thanks for folding the laundry, babe." And he's like, "Oh, aren't you gonna help?" And I was like, in my mind, I was like, "What the, like, oh my God, like, aren't I gonna help? Like, what does that mean? Like, I don't do enough." And I started having this internal dialogue that was like, I got so charged by that one comment, and I kept telling myself, I'm like, I know it's just a comment, and I'm making a story what it means, and I'm like, but what the fuck does it mean? Like, is he implying that I don't do enough?
Yeah.
And so after a while, like after ruminating on it and reflecting, and I kept bringing it back to, I know it's about me. I know it's like, it was this battle. It's like, I know it's about me. It's something's getting triggered, but still, like, I know he was, and I kept like pointing the finger and going back and forth. But after I really was able to take ownership of it and truly identify that it is my own insecurity that was getting triggered, because if I knew I was enough, there's no way I would have that kind of reaction. Instead, I was playful and light, and I would be like, I'd like just, I don't know, I would like come give him a hug, be like, yes, baby, I'll help you. You need my help. I don't know. I would do something. I wouldn't be triggered though. And so, what finally helped me though, come to the realization that it was all me, was I told myself, I was like, Vanessa, you need to lead by example and show him what it looks like to be accountable for yourself. So it was still like my ego was helping me to take ownership of it. to show him what it looked like to be the responsible person in that relationship.
Yeah. Well, also, or are you, is he coming from a genuine place, or is he being triggered by you being like, thanks, and walking away? I think that's, because my husband will do stuff like that too. And I think what I've learned to do, because I feel guilty, like, I should help. And then I'll say something like, oh, I was really enjoying you doing it, but if you want help, I'll help you. And I have to mean it genuinely. Like, if you genuinely want help, I'll help. But I was really enjoying the fact that you were doing it without me. And then let them decide. And if he says, you know what, I'm really busy, I've got all these emails to get to, I'd really like it if you help me. Then I'm like, okay, there's a reason, rather than he's just feeling like somehow it's my job or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, trying to figure out also whether what's going on, why is he asking that, and it could be just that he's thinking, oh, I've got this thesis and I feel so super stressed out, or it could be something that's not genuine and whatever.
Yeah.
I think for me, one of the things that's helped is sort of overlay to Tom's work is the 4 agreements, and one of them being I'm not responsible. Don't take anything personally.
Yeah.
So when somebody reacts in a way that is viewed as negative or whatever, it's not about me. It might be directed
Can you
at
tell me what the 4 agreements are? I don't know what those are.
Miguel Ruiz is the author.
Okay. Then
one is don't take anything personally.
Always do your best.
Always do your best. Be impeccable with your word, which is basically don't talk bad about people. And what's the 4th one?
Don't make assumptions.
Yeah, don't make assumptions.
Oh God, that was my husband. He makes assumptions that everything drives me crazy.
So
we're going to the grocery store. Why? Anyway.
So it's helpful for me to use those to take a step back and go, when somebody's, directing what feels like negative energy, it's not about me. It's something in them that's causing them to react in that way. It isn't me.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, exactly. It's not about me. I know I must tell myself that about 20 times a day. It's not about me, Vanessa. It's not. I need to just wear a shirt. It's not about me. So it's Paula's birthday party today. She's turning 7.
So exciting.
Happy birthday.
So she just woke up and came and poked her head in my door and goes, my birthday party today.
Yay. What are you guys doing for the party?
What are you doing, baby? Jungle Jacks with all her friends.
Awesome. Sounds like a good time.
So we've only got 10 minutes left.
Oh, wow.
About 10 pages or more. We've not been very disciplined today.
I know. Where are we? What page are we on? 195? Oh, no, 196 now?
Yeah, I'm on 446.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that has the second paragraph there. I am strongly encouraging you to think out of the box, non-conform, transcend your culture, and expand your notion of the possible beyond what is commonly held to be acceptable. I'm not sure why I had that. I just like that one. And then in the aside there, the quality, content, and intensity of your thoughts typically limit the options and opportunities of your being. The open-minded skeptic is free to explore anything, anywhere, with demanding standards for converting experience into knowledge, truth. The closed-minded skeptic is trapped by the limits he places on his thoughts and abilities. Yeah. I like the quality, content, and intensity of your thoughts, how it affects the opportunities, because that helps me to be more mindful of what I am thinking and the stories that I'm perpetuating. Knowing that the quality of my thoughts, what I'm thinking in my mind, is going to affect who I am as a person and ultimately affect the quality of my life. Yeah, just through reading this material, being on this journey is helping me to be a lot more mindful and aware. Because it seems like, when you first learn about meditation, it's all about observing your thoughts.
Yeah.
And I just, where I am in life now, I don't know, I feel a lot more capable of doing that and not letting the thoughts like be me and take me over, but to be able to be the witness of the thoughts and then catch them and then consciously change them if I need to. How are you guys with that? With being mindful and observing your thoughts?
Yeah, I certainly feel like that, my capacity increases as I get older, for sure. And that, and the times when I get triggered and reactive are becoming so much fewer. It used to be that I was always triggered. I'm a volatile person. And now actually I'm not a volatile person anymore. I have moments of volatility, but I'm actually, my baseline is very, very different from what it used to be. So yeah, I feel like, slow, steady, 2 steps forward, 1 step back progress.
Mm-hmm. Right.
That's definitely how it feels for me. And like I said before, I go in and out of like putting a lot of effort into this work, and then other times, it sort of fades away, and then it's like, oh wait, I got to get back to it. And but I suppose as you go along and you gather quality, some of it happens maybe without conscious intent, like it becomes more a part of your being. Because I used to be a very reactive person as well, and I'm not nearly so reactive. But yes, I still have buttons that can be pushed.
But now I find, I definitely got buttons too. But when those buttons are pushed, at least I'm aware of those buttons being pushed, and I'm aware that I have a choice to choose either fear or love. I still choose fear, but at least I'm consciously choosing fear, right? Like there is that moment around. But I feel like that. Yeah, as long as there's that awareness to consciously choose, eventually it'll tip over to choosing love. Like right now, it's probably about 50-50, or maybe 80-20, 80 fear, 20 love. But yeah, the more I practice, the more I'll tip the scale.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Anything else on that page?
Yeah, I'm still struggling. I realize I really have to read it in the book form. I can't just listen to it because it's like I got nothing underlined. So I'm like, I don't
know. The next page over, I just like at the top there, second paragraph, where he says, a rational argument rarely has any effect on an irrational belief. And that just helps me to disengage. The top of 197, the second paragraph. It starts with, this is an emotional, ego-driven position.
Got it.
Yeah. And so a rational argument rarely has an effect on an irrational belief. It helps me to disengage from when I notice somebody else is reacting from ego and they're being argumentative. I understand that anything I say right now is not going to be well received. And so there's no point in me trying to show them through my ration, through my logic. The best thing for me to do is really just hold space, send them love. And when they're ready to see or hear, if they're ever ready to see a bigger picture, then I'll share with them. But if they're not, I really need to just.
Well, and I think one of the things that's really hard to know is how you affect people, not through your words, but through your actions and through, in that way, because they're very unlikely to ever tell you, oh yeah, you're an example for me, or trying to be more like you because of, some reason or another. And it's the ripples, I guess, that you send out that you're not always aware of. How much do your kids pick up from you, not just from what you say, but just unconsciously through seeing how you are in certain situations or how you react in the world or those kind of things. And or not just your kids, but other people around you. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I guess, yeah, I remember a couple days ago, Bobby and I were going through some friction, and I remember just getting really vulnerable with him and feeling like, and telling him like, how I feel is like, I feel like, actually I said to him, I feel like a loser. Like that's what was coming up. I was just feeling so insecure, and I remember saying it to him and then like crying and like being so raw and vulnerable. And then the next day he had a major breakthrough and was like so vulnerable, and yeah, like I saw him break down and like in a way I've never seen him before. And then after when we were talking about it, he's like, baby, it was through your example. He's like, because, and I'm like, what? So just hearing that helps me to be able to continue being more vulnerable and open, because I can see the effect that it has on him, especially when he tells me. I'm like, oh wow, like, yeah, that's super encouraging to continue to be in that place, when you can see the effect that it has on others, and when they just blatantly tell you.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, it was really cool. So I know we have 2 minutes left. So anything else on this page, and then we'll just do a closing circle.
I just like the second to last paragraph. By growing the quality of whatever state of being we presently find ourselves in, we evolve the quality of our consciousness. You can start from any point, but the optimal place to start is from wherever you happen to be today. So basically, that's Tom just saying,
just do it.
Wherever you're at, just start.
Yeah,
That's a good closing circle line.
Yeah. That's a really good closing circle. Yeah. So final thoughts, ladies?
Well, I'm glad I got to reconnect. It felt like a little while since I'd seen you guys, and I learned that I can't just listen to the tapes. So that was good knowledge.
Yeah, for sure.
As usual, it's always good to have somebody to talk through this stuff, and it does help to keep me a little more accountable. I have a tendency to get off my path, and so I need constant reminding and reinforcement.
So. Yeah, this was really good. Thank you, ladies. I know we digressed there, and sometimes I feel that's important, especially we could do that because it's such a small group of us. Because that's one thing that Tom, I remember him saying is, really bring it home and make it about your personal experience. Don't make it so intellectual. It's about how you're applying this in your life. So this was good. I really appreciate this, to be able to connect with you guys and go deep and personal with each other.
Yeah, for sure. It's really helpful and joyful.
And it's always good to hear about someone who's had an experience with Tom, as you recently went to the Monroe Center.
I wish I could go more often. It was awesome to go twice, so in such short proximity. And actually, for me, because I went just before I had my whole weird health craziness, and it sort of felt like I was closing the chapter. So that was quite emotional for me in that way. So it's really good to do.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
All right. Well, until we meet again, I'll be on a road trip next Sunday. So, Steve.
I will be out of the state next Sunday.
All right. Well, happy travels, everyone.
I will be in Hawaii.
Ooh.
Where in Hawaii?
Hawaii.
Wow. Have fun. And have a great birthday party.
Thanks, I will.
Oh, you've got such a beautiful puppet there.
All right. I guess we'll see you guys in 2 weeks then.
Okay. So take care.
Bye.
Bye, guys.